The Fancounters Celebrity Podcast, number 152. Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast.
You were like the carrot top of interviewers.
Wow, how disappointing was that question?
You did not just ask me that.
It's a very big question.
Never mind, I'm done. I'm not doing the show.
Wow, I can't believe it. I'm telling you, I'm hooked.
Nick.
Yeah, he's so awesome. He's a good friend of mine.
Welcome to the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. My name's Nick, and along with me this week is...
Tracy.
Nice to have you back.
Thanks, buddy.
You can follow us on social media on Instagram at Fancounters Live. Email us at hello@fancounters.com. You can see everything, all of our networks and shows at fancounters.com, so you can join us there. Tracy is back. You brought us a great guest last time, Bubba Bradley.
Yep, he was a good time.
He was. And if you missed those special 2 stories that he told that were a little inappropriate for our podcast, they're still on Sharpie Nation if you want to go back and listen to the stories Bubba had to share. But he was a good guest.
Yeah, those were some good stories, and you definitely want to catch them if you can.
Yeah. So who did you bring me this week?
I got John Dittrich, the drummer, and he also shares lead vocals on some songs with Restless Heart.
Restless Heart. It's a band that has over 25 singles on the charts, 6 consecutive number 1 hits, and 4 of their albums have been certified gold by the RIAA. I don't know what that is. What is that?
It stands for the Recording Industry Association of America.
Awesome. I'm sure it's prestigious.
It is.
They've also won a wide range of awards from many organizations, including the Academy of Country Music's top vocal group. And John Dittrich is here to chat with us about some behind-the-scenes stories. I heard he's got a stalker.
Yeah, that's what I heard too.
And we're going to find out today. It's all coming up right now on the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. John Dittrich, welcome to Fancounters. Thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. How are you doing?
We're good.
Excellent.
So we introduced you in our opening to our audience, gave a little history about yourself and the band, namely that you're a member of Restless Heart, a band that celebrates over 35 years in country music. And there's a story that you kind of fell into country music by accident. So, because I know you're playing other kinds of music first, is there a difference between being a drummer for country music versus like rock music?
There are some differences, yes. Not a great amount, I don't think, for me anyway. In rock music, you very rarely ever use a side stick on the snare drum, which gives you a kind of a woodblock kind of sound. Very, very rarely are you going to hear that in rock music. In country music, you hear it all the time. In rock music, you won't necessarily hear a train beat, which is just 16th notes. I don't know if you can hear this, but that's a train beat.
Yep.
I can hear that.
You don't play that. You hardly ever see that in rock music. Sometimes you see brushes. Like I know on Don Henley's a New York Minute, Jeff Porcaro played a brush in his left hand on the snare drum, and he used a stick for the cymbal in the right hand. So, very creative. That's one of my favorite tracks that Jeff Porcaro ever played, by the way, was New York Minute.
That's cool. Okay, what made you decide that you wanted to be a musician for a living?
Well, I was one of those people that kind of knew that from the age of 5. My dad told me that I had, he had been a national champion rudimental snare drummer in high school. And so he had drumsticks laying around, and he told me when I was about 3 years old, I picked them up and started, banging away. And so as I got a little bit older, about the age of 5, he started teaching me some simple rudiments that I could do. And, of course, then I picked up the violin in elementary school. So it was something that I always had an ability for and a talent for. And it just went on and on, throughout junior high and high school, playing in the band and the orchestra, and through college, where I played in the jazz band and the symphonic band, and became a percussion major. Music was pretty much my sole focus.
Was your entry into Restless Heart kind of what you considered to be your big break?
Oh yes, absolutely. It was my big break.
And Paul Gregg was oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I had been in a band with Paul Gregg in Nashville for, I don't know, about 9 months. And I think we made about $960 in that 9 months. Yeah.
Can't pay rent with that.
Yeah. Sometimes the beer tab, was bigger than what the band was getting paid. So, it was, one of the good old days,
Yeah.
We remained friends. We played golf, and I started working the clubs in Nashville. I was very fortunate back in those days in Nashville. I could always work, and it was always a steady job. And he came over one day and he said, "Look, we have a project going." Everybody had a project in Nashville back then. And he said, "I want you to hear it, and tell you what you think." And so it was a vocal band. They required everybody sing, and of course he knew I sang, and I heard the songs. I really liked it, and I said, "Sure, I'm interested." So they brought me into the studio, not to audition as a drummer, but to audition as a singer.
Ah.
And I naturally gravitated toward the high harmony parts when I was singing. So they told me to sing the high harmony parts on, I don't know, 3-4 songs. And this went on for several months in and out of the studio, and I still hadn't played drums for them. Wow. And I said to them, I said, "Well, I said to Tim Dubois, I said, don't you want to hear me play the drums?" And he said, "Well, no, Paul says you can play." And I said, "Well, I'd feel better if, I played for you." And well, okay, so they put on a track, and I went out and played. I think I got through the first chorus, and he spoke through the talkback. He said, "That's great. Come on in," and that was it.
Wow.
So Paul had told him, he said, I'm not worried about him as a drummer. He's a really good drummer. He said, "I'm more interested in how his voice is going to blend with everybody else's." And as it turned out, the blend was very good, thankfully. So that's how I got in the band.
Did the band have a drummer already that you were sort of replacing, or
Well, as Tim Dubois said, the original name of the band was called Okie. It was called the Okie Project because everybody in the band at that time was from Oklahoma. Ah. And Tim Dubois told me, he said, "We auditioned every drummer from Oklahoma we could think of, and none of them could sing." And he said, "We decided, well, I guess we can't be the Okie Project because we're going to have to go outside of Oklahoma to find a drummer that sings."
A New Yorker, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we know Tim Dubois has discovered, many artists, Alan Jackson, Brooks and Dunn. Now, it sounds like you got connected with him through your friend Paul, correct? Who's a member of Restless Heart.
Yeah, Tim, back in those days, Tim was an accounting professor at Vanderbilt. And he had also written 2 really big country songs, "Love in the First Degree," Alabama, and "She Got the Gold Mine, I Got the Shaft" for Jerry Reed. Usually, accounting professors / hit songwriters don't usually go together. And he wanted to have an outlet for his songs that he was writing with his friends in town, Van Stevenson, Dave Robbins, people like that. He couldn't get anybody to cut his songs because he said, well, they're kind of, not country enough for country, but they're not pop enough for pop either. So he decided he wanted to put together a band. Well, he had already been working in the studio with Greg and Paul and Dave and Verlin Thompson, who was the original lead singer. So he decided he wanted to put a band together. And so he basically handpicked everybody to be in the band, and we cut all of his songs. And as luck would have it, RCA thought that we were the future of country music. We headed in the right direction, and they signed us. And then, of course, Tim went on to become the head of Arista Records in Nashville. And yeah, as you mentioned, he discovered Alan Jackson and Brooks and Dunn and several others.
Question about the band when it comes up. Sometimes there's always rumors as to why an original person left and all of that. Your original singer of Restless Heart was Verlin Thompson, and he actually left, though, before any music was even released. So how did you find Larry Stewart? How was he added to the group, and was it unanimous? Was there any dissension?
It was a matter of Verlin decided that he didn't want to be part of the group, and he struggled with the keys that Tim wanted the songs recorded in. There's no doubt in my mind that we would have been a success with Verlin. Verlin was a very country singer, but when he left, Dave Innes, our keyboard player, said, "Don't worry, I know a guy." He played in a band in Nashville with Larry, so they brought Larry in, and Larry sang some of the stuff. And as Tim said, he said, Verlin was a very country rock kind of a singer, and he said Larry brings a different dimension to this. He said he brings more of a pop styling to this, which is the direction that I think that we want to go, pop country. And he said it could help us on the adult contemporary side. Larry can sing songs that Verlin really wouldn't sound really authentic on. So we just that was the band makeup right there, and we recorded the first album, and the first album was finished on Tim Dubois' nickel. He financed the whole thing.
Wow.
And we took it and delivered it to RCA, and that was basically what happened.
Are there any of those songs that were on that first album that maybe you have a recording of, or someone does, with Verlin as the lead vocalist?
There are some tapes around with Verlin singing some of those songs. Yes, "Let the Heartache Ride" Verlin originally sang on. But there's some other things that we didn't cut because Larry wouldn't sound authentic singing them. There was a song called "Hellbent for Heaven," which Verlin just killed, but Larry wouldn't be able to pull off that kind of performance because Larry didn't have that kind of a voice.
That's pretty cool, though. That you get the lost sessions of Restless Heart, right?
Well, I was wondering, we might, maybe someday we'll get to hear it.
Well, somebody has a copy of Vince Gill singing the demo of Dancy's Dream.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the most famous number one songs you guys have is "When She Cries," which you sing lead vocals on. How did you decide? How do you guys decide who sings lead vocals on the songs?
Well, there's a story here. When Larry left the band, he recorded a solo album, and the song "When She Cries." Now, I didn't know this until some years later. I didn't know the story on this. Larry was pitched "When She Cries," and he recorded "When She Cries." And Scott Hendricks was producing Larry at the time. And when they got the album finished and they sat and they listened down to the whole thing, Scott turns to Larry and he says, "Larry," he said, "there's only one song on here that just doesn't fit the rest of the record." And Larry said, "Well, what song is that?" And he said, "When She Cries." And Larry said, "You've got to be kidding me. He said, "That's my favorite song." He said, "Yeah, it just doesn't fit the record, you know." And he said, "Well," he said, "if I can't do it," he said, "I want the guys to have it." And Josh Leo had been talking to Scott, and Scott called him and said they were, you know, we could have the song. And at the time, because I had been a lead vocalist on one track on I forget which album it was, but the label said, "We want John to be the lead singer." So I was named the lead singer. And we cut When She Cries, and I have to give Josh Leo all the credit. He came up with the entire arrangement. The song that we never heard Larry's version. We heard the original Nashville demo of the song, and it was a typical Nashville demo. You know, it was 2/4, kind of a bouncy little thing. Mm-hmm. And Josh came up with this arrangement. He wanted to do the vocal intro from the 10cc record, "I'm Not in Love," which we ended up doing on a synthesizer. He wanted 4 on the floor, which means bass drum on every beat. And he wanted that Don Henley, "Last Worthless Evening," kind of a feel on the acoustic guitars. And so he put that whole thing together, and Josh is the one that really made that a monster hit.
Now, there's a couple times in an artist's career where they probably remember where they were at that time. So there's got to be 2 instances for you. Maybe once, the first time you heard a Restless Heart song on the radio, but do you remember where you were or what was going on when you first heard When She Cries play on the radio?
Oh.
Throwing you back just a few years.
I don't remember the first time that I heard that.
That's okay.
I honestly don't. I remember the first time I heard our first single. The first time you hear yourself on the radio is a pretty amazing thing. I had just we had our kids in private school, and I had just I had just dropped them off, and I was on my way home, and "Let the Heartache Ride" comes on the radio. Now, I was so used to hearing tapes in the car that at first it didn't dawn on me that it wasn't a tape, that it was actually the radio.
Right.
And it got about halfway through the first verse, and I went, "Holy crap, I'm on the radio." You know? So, and Larry Stewart had the same kind of experience. Same thing, almost exactly the same thing happened to him.
That's pretty cool.
I don't remember the first time I heard When She Cries, but I remember listening to Casey Kasem's Top 40 Countdown, and I remember him saying, "And this week at number 5, When She Cries by Restless Heart." You know, and we were in between, I think it was Elton John and Whitney Houston.
Wow.
Or something like that.
You know, Casey Kasem's...
That was pretty exciting.
Casey Kasem's show was the first time that I had heard Restless Heart on the radio. So
wow.
that brings back memories.
Yeah, it sure does.
Do you have a favorite album that the band has released?
Do I have a favorite album?
You stumped him.
I did.
You stumped me. Well, I mean, they're all kind of my favorite. There are songs on every one of them that I really love. I'll tell you, there's one track in particular that, although it wasn't a single, and it could never really be a single in the country format anyway. And I forget what album it was on. It might have been on Big Dreams. It might have been on Wheels. I'm not sure, but maybe you guys know. There's a song called "River of Stone," and it's just a great vocal performance by the band.
I know the song, but I don't remember which album it's on.
Yeah, I don't either. Of
Well,
course, that's only been how many decades ago?
two or three.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking 3.
Yeah, me too.
John, it's hard to think about Restless Heart being called traditional, but now that we're in the different wave of country music, some people might refer to it, but back when you were releasing music, you had a very contemporary sound. And because of this, the band's music was sometimes criticized over your harmony-heavy ballads. Did that ever bother you guys at the time to have publications not really appreciate your music or not have as much to say about your new releases as they might the Judds or George Strait or somebody?
Well, yeah, it bothered us at first. I remember when I'll Still Be Loving You came out, and it crossed over to the adult contemporary format and became a #1 record in the adult contemporary format. And I remember Radio and Records magazine, a big article on the front page, country's own Restless Heart scores #1 in the adult contemporary chart. We were heroes because that was the gold ring to cross over. Nashville wanted to cross over and get an adult contemporary hit, which we did. Well, then the traditional movement came back, and everybody wanted country music more traditional, include the radio stations for the most part. Mm-hmm. And when She Cries crossed over, we got crucified by radio. That song was actually a bigger pop hit on the pop charts than it was a country hit.
Does that mean you guys were the first crossover country artists to do that then?
No, I think the Judds had done it. As far as RCA Records goes, I think the Judds had crossed over. I don't know if they had a #1 record, but we did. We had a #1 record. We may have been the first. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But they weren't as heavily as you used crucified for doing so.
Right.
No. But ours was, I don't know. The critics never liked us. We never got great reviews, which really it did bother us. The criticism was I remember from Robert K. Orman, who was a very well respected writer in Nashville, still is. And oddly enough, he loves Restless Heart. He always has. But he was always very critical of our production. And he told me one time, he said, it's too slick, too polished. He said, it's just too produced, which, I could see that criticism, when he made it. We spent a lot of time in the studio polishing things and, re-recording things and mixing things. So I could see that comparison. Tell you what, those records hold up 30 years later.
Oh, for sure. I agree with that. Sometimes criticism, especially that from the media and magazines, newspapers, that sort of thing, could cause dissent within the group, a little bit of arguing or fighting or anything. Did you guys have moments where it was hard to get along with your bandmates?
Every band goes through that. I think after you spend 10 years, touring and being on a bus together, and every time you come home, you either have to have a business meeting, or you have to go into the recording studio, or you have to meet with the label, or you have to meet with the accountant. We needed some time off. And of course there were tensions, nothing, I don't ever super serious, with me anyway,
Okay.
It got serious with a couple of other guys, but, we needed a break. We needed to get away from each other for a while, and we did. And I think over the course of that time off, we realized what we had, and that we collectively were never going to have anything that good again. And so we got back together in 1998. and briefly in '98 did a tour with Vince Gill, put out a greatest hits record with 3 new songs on it. The three songs, the 2 things they released to radio didn't do well at all. And basically there was, in 1999, there was nowhere for us to go. So we went our separate ways again. All of a sudden in 2001, Rick Shipp, who was the head of William Morris here in Nashville, and was our agent from the very beginning, called Larry and said, "Larry, I think the time is right. Things have shifted. I think the time is right to put Restless Heart back together." And he said, "I think you guys can work, and I think you guys can do well." So we all got together at Greg's house and sang some songs, and it's like riding a bike. Everything just fell into place, and Rick Shipp came over, and so I believe it was the last half of 2001 we got back together. We've been back together ever since.
Nice.
That's cool. When you talked about the band disbanding and people went off and did their own thing, was that kind of like the time period when we saw in country music where they were trying to pilfer the lead singers out of groups and make them become solo artists? Because I'm just wondering if that was kind of around the same time when that happened.
It might have been. I remember back around that time, the labels were trying to sign the songwriters as artists.
Okay.
And I remember a big backlash from radio about that. Radio hated that because their position was, listen, you're signing these songwriters to become artists. They're not writing songs for anybody else. He said the quality of songs that you're releasing on your other artists is really going downhill, and we really want you to quit it. And of course that phase didn't last very long, but I remember that labels were signing songwriters left and right, the songwriters that had success.
Okay.
Because they figured, well, we can get one guy that we have to deal with, or one girl we can deal with. We don't have to deal with a whole group of people, and they can write their own songs, and this is going to be great. Well, radio didn't agree, and of course, radio is the thing that kept everybody in business.
Right. Well, you guys had, the reason why I was asking that was because you guys had so many consecutive number 1 hits, and then you followed up your next album with a couple more hits, and then it just seemed like that was kind of the end or the downfall type of thing during that period. And it was also like when Little Texas, they lost Brady Seals and Tim Rushlow, and I'm trying to think of some of the other bands that they were trying to do solo careers, and that's kind of why I was asking if that was where that time period came from with you guys when you technically disbanded and then came back together again.
Larry told me when we all got back together, he told me, he said, "Johnny," said, I never wanted to be a solo artist. He said, I've always wanted to be in Restless Heart, and but he needed a break. He just needed a break.
Yeah.
And of course, we knew he was going to put out a solo record, as he had to try to stay relevant. We were going to go on as best we could. We didn't want to replace Larry because, in my mind, there's no replacing Larry.
Okay.
We didn't want to bring in another lead singer. We decided that we'd do it ourselves, 4-piece, and we'll sink or swim with that. And we were very fortunate that we had When She Cries right out of the gate. Then, of course, about 1995, things changed again because When She Cries was such a huge pop record. We had pretty much lost a lot of support at country radio at that time. And come 1995, there wasn't really any place for us to go. The pop market was what have you done for me lately?
Yeah.
Show me the next hit, and we weren't there long enough to build up a body of work in that format, to stay relevant in the format. So I folded the tent in 95. Of course, I'm going backwards now from where we were, but
That's okay.
I folded the tent in 95. We got back together in 98. We went our separate ways again. And then the last half of 2001, we got back together, and we've been back together ever since.
Well, on the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast, one of the things that we have to do with every guest is get your stories of any weird, creepy, or fun encounters you might have had with any fans over the years. So when you think of fan encounters, do any of them stick in your mind? Like, oh, this person I'll never forget. Have you had anything that stands out in your mind?
It wasn't a fan. I was more of a fan than, I'm sure that this individual didn't even know who I was or even care.
Okay.
We were at the Don Henley concert at Universal Amphitheater in LA, and I was with our manager Larry Fitzgerald, and we were on our way out, and you walk the backstage area at Universal's, a lot of it's outdoors, and there was this kind of a wooden walkway that you walk down to go to this door that went to the VIP parking lot. And so I opened this door, and there I am nose to nose with Jack Nicholson.
Oh, wow.
He's got on the black suit, the black shirt, the sunglasses, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And he lifts up his sunglasses and he looks at me and he smiles and he goes, "Shabab, shabab." And we moved out of the way, and we said, "Well, after you, Mr. Nicholson." And he nodded his head, "Thank you," and he walked by, and I got out in the parking lot, and I start jumping up and down, and I said to Larry, "That's the coolest thing that's ever happened to me."
I thought we were about to get a Don Henley story.
Yeah, no kidding, eh?
No, never met Don. Met Glenn because we did a show with him. The only one of the Eagles that there's two Eagles I haven't met. No, there's one. Felder's the only guy that I hadn't met besides Henley.
So you shared a memory here. Now, my question is, have you ever had a stalker?
Absolutely, yes. One.
Really?
Yeah, I did, honestly.
No, it's not me.
For a brief period of time. It was when I was the lead singer and we were four-piece. And I get this call on the phone in the hotel, and we registered under assumed names in the hotel. Oh, my phone rings, and it's this woman's on the other end of the phone, and she says to me, "So, you interested in taking a naked midnight horseback ride with me?" And I'm like, "What? Who is this?" And she wouldn't tell me her name, but she knew where I was. She knew what room I was in, and she came to the show, and she made herself known. And I'm like, "Look, nope."
No.
So we're the next day. Well, actually, it was Kellogg, Idaho. It was in Coeur d'Alene, ski lodge up on top of the mountain, and we were staying at the hotel at the base of the mountain. It was a very nice hotel. And the next day we get on the bus, and our lighting guy at the time, I'm telling the guys this story, and the lighting guy goes, "Oh yeah," he said, "she sat out at the main mixing board with me the whole show." And he said, I can't remember exactly what he said, but something like, she wants two things, and one of them is you. And he said, and she wants you bad. And I'm like, oh my God, I've got to, I don't remember exactly how I got rid of her. It didn't last long, but she claimed she was a private detective, and that's how she found me. And somehow or other, it's been a long, long time ago. Somehow or other, it just ended, thankfully.
Were you married or in a relationship at that time?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was married.
That would have been a huge problem.
Yeah.
It would have been a very huge problem. One that I didn't want any part of.
Right.
Understandable. Yeah. Stalkers can be very
Scary.
very problematic.
Basically, I mean, she had to have a major screw loose.
Yeah, no kidding. John, there's very few drummers that can sing lead vocals. How did you come up with that talent that you can play drums and still sing lead vocals, which, a lot of times is off of a different beat from what you're doing on the drums?
Yeah. I always say that you have to have the ability to put the playing on automatic pilot. You can't be thinking about what you're playing. That has to just come naturally, and it just has to flow. I actually I took a poll of drummers who sang and drummers who didn't sing. Drummers who sing always said, it's just something I could always do. Drummers who don't sing say, I don't have any idea how you can do that. That just seems to be, it just seems to be something you either can do or you can't.
Yeah, understandable. Being a musician, I just am in awe when drummers can sing lead vocals and still play the drums.
Well, let's talk about some shows that you've got. Surprisingly, 2020 is not totally canceled for Restless Heart. You've got dates up on your website. Touring has to be really difficult right now with COVID. How have you been able to keep these shows, and are they still going to happen? And what can we look forward to?
I think there are 4 shows on the books for the rest of the year. The end of the month, and I think we have 2 shows in November. The shows that we are doing, some of them have been pushed from earlier in the year to, October and November. Mm-hmm. We also have shows that were pushed from 2020 to January and February of 2021. We will have played 16 shows this year, down from about 68 to 70, which is the norm.
That's unbelievable.
Wow.
And I have friends that play with the bigger artists that they've already been told they're not going back to work till 2022.
Seriously?
Yep.
Wow. That's got to be rough in the music business.
Yeah, it's yeah. Well, of course, the big groups that sell out arenas, they have to sell the arenas in order to make the expenses and the salaries and everything else. They literally can't go into an arena and distance, because if you only sell half the tickets, everybody's losing money. So
exactly.
It's groups in our category, I think, that are going to find it easier to work in 2021. We're not so expensive that they can't socially distance.
Right.
Actually, one show that we're doing in Houston, it's a small dinner club, and everybody plays there. Some big names play there. In order for them to be able to make it, because they're so small, we are going to go down there and we're going to play 2 dinner shows instead of 1. Because cool. They have to separate people, and the only way that they can break even is to do it that way, and we agreed to do it.
That's pretty cool. That's really a good idea. You guys, since you've got some downtime, are we going to see some new Restless Heart music hopefully coming out of this?
Nope.
No.
We have a lot of things that are in the can, but Larry has released a Christmas album, and he's released some new material. he's been busy on that. I don't think there's that much of a desire on anybody else's part in the band to try to put out new material.
Okay.
We don't really have an outlet for it. Radio isn't going to play it.
Yeah.
And what we do in our shows is, the people want to hear the hits, and we've put together a pretty good show that has all the hits and some other entertaining things in it that the audience really likes, and so we just stay with that. Now, our friend Shenandoah just put out a great album with a bunch of duets on it, and they're pushing the song that they did with Lady A, and they're getting a lot of traction out of it. So my hat's off to them.
That's pretty cool.
Actually, we're performing with Shenandoah the end of the month up in Indiana.
Very nice.
A little close to us, not close enough though.
I'm a little hurt though. They didn't ask us to do a duet on their record,
Well, you're not doing new music, so maybe they heard.
I don't know.
Well, I do applaud you for sticking to your hits and that sort of thing on a tour like that. There is an old joke, a comedian joke that goes that if they're like, all right, now we're going to play some new stuff, that's your cue to go to the bathroom and you got a few minutes to come back.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So, but nobody's going to miss When She Cries or
No.
any of the good ones.
No.
So.
People, our audience anyway, that has matured with us, I don't think they want to hear new music. They want to hear what they want to hear, and that's the hits.
Well, I will
They
tell
want to
you.
hear the familiar.
Well, I will tell you, with me, I've been a fan since day one of you guys, and always will be. And going, through the hits and what you guys have done throughout the years, I was really pleased to see when you came out with Still Restless.
Yeah.
And I loved the tribute song you did to for the military. That was amazing, and I still play that to this day.
Yeah. Torch of Freedom.
Yes, it's incredible.
Yep. Yeah, that was a good one. We played that. We played that on special occasions, and it's not part of our show. Never really was a part of our show, but we did play it on special occasions. Paul also wrote a song called Home, which is a ballad that he sings solo with just piano accompaniment, and it gets a standing ovation every single time. And it's also a military tribute song.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, John, we know that we can keep up with the band at restlessheartband.com. Do you have social media where people can keep up with you personally?
Just Facebook. I don't have a big presence on social media.
Okay.
I'm a recluse.
There's advantages to that.
There is an advantage to that. I'm pretty low key. I stay pretty quiet.
Well, we're really glad you joined us today for an interview. Thanks so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
well,
thank
absolutely.
you.
It's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you having me.
Our thanks to John Dittrich for joining us on the show this week. Tracy, thanks for bringing him along.
Hey, it was great, man. I loved doing it.
It's funny, he talked about Restless Heart crossing over, and then kind of country music was upset with him about that.
Yep.
Now, you probably remember that more than I do, but what I remember is from my time in country music is when Leanne Rimes and Shania Twain started doing the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
From This Moment became a pop hit. Leanne Rimes had How Do I Live that became a pop hit. And at that time, country music was upset with them for
Yes, they
crossing
were.
over. But now I don't think if an artist did that now, it's just like Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
It's like no big deal anymore.
Yeah, they don't seem to make a big deal about it anymore. It's just like, oh, okay, yeah, now you've crossed over multiple charts.
Right. And Darius Rucker, same thing. Nobody
Yep.
made a big deal when he went from Hootie and the Blowfish to being a country artist.
Yep.
I think at first maybe it was a little shocking, but
It was shocking to me because Hootie,
Mm-hmm.
Hootie gonna become a
I
country
only
singer
wanna
now.
be with you. I'm not a singer, you can tell. Anyway, so it was a lot of fun. Thanks again for being
Cool.
here.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. All right, follow us on social media. We are at Fancounters Live on Instagram. You can also search Facebook for Fancounters. You'll find our big group there. And then if you want to join the itty bitty teeny tiny group, it's called Sharpie Nation on Facebook, and we'd love to have you there as well. Email us if you want a guest on the show. All you got to do is send their name to us. If we get them on the show, we'll involve you in that episode. You can send those suggestions to hello@fancounters.com. That's going to do it for me. Next week, we're joined by another celebrity guest. You never know who it's going to be because I don't tell you in advance, but it's worth coming back. I guarantee that. So stay safe. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great week. Bye-bye.